This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. To you and yours, we'd like to wish you a happy Memorial Day weekend. We hope that you guys are enjoying yourselves. I mean, these are basically the telltale signs that we might be coming across summer, right? Like, I know up here in the north, they're like teasing us with this up and down weather and stuff, but usually getting a nice long weekend as we start getting into those summer days is a good sign. And especially as we are trying to kind of come on the other side of this whole situation regarding the pandemic, I'm sure family and friends and the ability to get together and just have a good time, but also to be able to celebrate the men and women who have fought and died for our country as well, too. So I think all the culmination of these things, sacrifice, doing your due diligence to continue us to move us forward, I think it's nothing but the best of everything that we have to offer in life. And so from here, The Baseline, we'd like to wish you guys a happy Memorial Day weekend. But, hey, there is a lot of basketball to be discussed because that's why they play the game. So let me go and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? How are you living this Memorial Day weekend?
Not too bad, fam. Yeah, I think I saw a tweet earlier today that, it is a little brisk up there in the north. I was like, it's 46 degrees and it's damn near June. Like,
somebody must have gotten the calendar days mixed up. It's not Labor Day weekend. It's Memorial Day weekend, okay? So just
tripping right now. So, I mean, hopefully you and yours are out there, not chilling literally, but more so figuratively and enjoying yourselves as well, too. But these games in the playoffs have been interesting. As we record, team or two has already exited the playoffs, so I guess we'll have to get them up on the slab here a little bit sooner than later. But ultimately, I think it's been all good, man. It's been a great run.
Well, yeah, and before we get into the news and notes, and we definitely have another great show on tap with you, tap for you guys, because it's that time for us to be doing the autopsy report. So we'll give you guys the goods on the two teams we'll be discussing on this upcoming episode. But I do want to get your take so far because, obviously a lot of people have been catching us do our hot mics. You're kind of like the Jay-Z, I'm the Memphis Bleak of this thing when it comes to our collaborations and doing the hot mic. But I really do want to get a little bit more of your perspective regarding your thoughts with the playoffs first round in its totality thus far.
I think it's been fun, honestly. I mean, a topic we'll obviously discuss is seeing that a lot of these arenas have fans at damn near full capacity back in the arena, and it's giving the playoffs even a look and feel that you'd want it to have when you're watching the game, like as normal. The syndicated crowd noise wasn't really doing it. But I think also, too, you're getting to see some guys like Trae Young and John Morant get their first taste of getting into the playoffs and having a little bit of success, and hitting big shots and showing that they are worthy, so to speak. So you obviously have your intrigue and drama with what the Clippers had going on. They were struggling in their series for a bit. So there's just a lot that's already happening, I think, in the first round of these playoffs. So I think it's been great for the league, and hopefully the fans and all listeners are enjoying it all, man. What about you?
Well, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the allure of these matchups. Unfortunately, the competition has not brought out more so than the intrigue of what the matchups should have brought out. And I don't know what you could kind of attribute that to. I do see that some of these teams, they clearly are not packing it in, and I appreciate that. I think at the end of the day, a lot of these teams are going to pretty much fall, where exactly it needs to be, and the series will wind up being exactly where we thought it would be. But I do appreciate the fact that teams are treating this, like any other NBA season, where this is the time where, you show up and you show out. But you can clearly see that there's a distinction in talent with some of the teams that are playing, which bodes well for us about our expectations about what's going to happen in the next round. Because I think there's definitely going to be some intriguing matchups in the semifinals for both of the conferences. But with that being said, and I think, we can get right into this part of it, Shaw, before we, dig into the autopsy. There's obviously something to be said about, the fervor of having fans at these NBA playoffs. And clearly there's been incidents that have occurred They kind of make us question, have we brought him back a little too quickly, too soon? Have we brought him back not really understanding a little bit of the responsibilities that still needs to be upheld? Or maybe just to something that I wanted to kind of highlight on this point is maybe it's just exposing something that really has not been properly addressed and has kind of been swept under the rug for a long time, and now it's kind of rearing its ugly head as we are back into some level of normalcy and excitement that we're able to see fans participating, rooting for their teams who are competing in the playoffs.
What did the kids say? That part, right? Like what you said kind of towards the end there, I think that probably sums it up. Is a long-standing issue that I think has been permeating and maybe gets swept under the rug just depending on what the players' tolerance are, but we're in the player empowerment era, and they are not taking it really kind of anymore, and they're not really tiptoeing around the issues. So outside of, in some cases, the actual verbal and in some cases even worse, physical assault, no matter what you are assaulting somebody with, if you're throwing things at them, that's assault, or you're spitting on them, that's assault. Not to mention the conversations about racist crowds and cities and things of that nature. Like, all of this is now really coming to light. So part of it is, hey, a lot of people have been cooped up for a while. They want to get out there and cheer for their favorite teams, and they've forgotten how to do that, I guess, in a respectful manner. Like, banter and shit talking is acceptable, but there's definitely lines that you should know as a human being that you shouldn't cross, with that, despite how much millions of dollars these players get paid. They're not here to just be disrespected. They're not, like the stuff that was said, like to John Morant and his family is downright. It's unruly. And I really, really feel bad, for him. And I hope Utah is stepping up and really taking care of that situation. And I think that's one of the main reasons they brought Dwayne Wade into that organization and that franchise, to try to help educate the population a little bit in that region about ways to kind of deal with diversity and issues and things of that nature. I mean, there's a lot going on there, and don't want to get all tangent and unpack all of that right now. But ultimately, I think what you said is really, really true. It's been happening for a very, very long time. And now, because they were gone and now they're back, and behaving in this ways, and it is a few bad apples, but it's really highlighting some of the issues that have always been underlying.
Yeah, I agree 110% with how you're saying it. You're a great what do you call it? Dignitary when it comes to this, Shaw, because you actually put it in a nice little package, for people who don't know, how to open up the present properly and be able to appreciate what really comes out of it. I'm the type of dude where it's like, I'm just rip this shit off until I actually get to whatever the prize is supposed to be. So here's the scab, and I'm about to just rip the Band-Aid off, and I can give a damn about, whether it hurts or not, because it's just it needs to be exposed for what it is. I'm just sick and tired of giving excuses for the behavior that is just, I guess, tolerated and allowed. I'm not going to sit here and start trying to point fingers. I'm pointing the fingers at the ownership and the people who own these arenas and stadiums. You have to set that standard. And I think time and time again, what comes of this is the money means more than the players. Yet you need the players to make you the money. Treat your players the same kind of way that you treat your money. And maybe then you can appreciate where they're coming from. Nobody should be subjected to the kind of abuse that these players have been subjected to, not just recently, but for all of the times that we talk about NBA and where it sits in the landscape of sports entertainment. And in any sport, for that matter, baseball, football, tennis, golf, whatever you name it. And I'm not even specifying this to a specific race. I'm saying just in general. There just needs to be better practice and accountability. And that accountability is the arena is owned by those that own the team. And they need to, if it means you're going to lose a little bit of money in making an example of some of these people to do it, so be it. But I think in the long term, it has a much more gratifying effect that the players are being taken seriously, that the league's approach is not being basically being admonished. Like, the league will say something, but the league really can't do anything because the league doesn't own the arenas, right? And so even if your intent is you want your patrons to call out these people when they're doing it, that's not also the responsibility of the patrons as well, too, to have to police their own, right? Like, you know that they're doing wrong. Exactly, they can point out that person they're doing wrong. But simply just taking a guy and throwing him out and saying, oh, you're banned from coming to our arena again, that's not enough. There needs to be a higher level of accountability for this type of egregiousness that takes place. That is my rant and my tirade about this, because often two times we seem to avoid where this all lies. If we as patrons pay money to a team and ownership that owns that establishment, that arena, it's the arena's responsibility to make sure there's security, to make sure that people are treated the same way that cops come and pull us over when we do something out in the public square, not even on private property, that is demeaning to another individual, and we get sent to jail for that. I don't understand that suddenly becoming a sports fan warrants the measure that they can just go out there and get away with doing the stuff that you know that they wouldn't be caught dead trying to do out in the middle of the street. Because Lord knows if a Russell Westbrook, if a Tristan Thompson, if a LeBron James actually is out there in the public with that person trying to pull that stunt, it's the LeBron Jameses that get arrested while guys like that act like they can press charges. And that's just, it's a hypocritical viewpoint that I think at times doesn't seem to get called out, because we always seem to let the team, the management, and the ownership get by with not doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is holding these people accountable, not just in the arenas, but also in general to the public view.
I think there's a lot. There's a lot to this, and there's layers in here that, we can start to speculate, because, as you were, kind of waxing poetically there, I said, you know what? Yeah, I think you're really onto something. And there's maybe even maybe a hidden layer to this too, is some retribution that maybe some of these fans feel from the Black Lives Matters protests and all the things of that nature, like the stuff they can't say or feel like they can't say right now socially, they're taking out maybe on some of these players via sport. And they're really kind of showing maybe some of their true colors are. So it's the next level of, all right, well, I'm not going to be just overtly and openly racist or whatever the case may be, because to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, I don't want to put out fake news, if you will, on our show, but to my knowledge, all of these things have kind of happened to Black players in the short term that the fans have been back, to my knowledge, one way or another. And from what I've seen, it wasn't other Black people doing it to them. So there might be something there to some of that, and it just could be obnoxious fans, just obnoxious fans who don't know how to act. So this is definitely a something that we should probably stick a pin in and maybe kind of come back to and see how the playoffs progress and see if these incidents continue, or if you're alluding to, will teams and ownership and the arena management really step up here to ensure that the players are playing the game safely and not being assaulted by these fans.
Look, I would love one day to see an owner get out there in the middle of the floor and say, I love every single one of you people, but I'm telling you right now, if any of you people pull the kind of stunt that I'm seeing right now, I have cops waiting for you people, and I will make sure that we will apply the fullest extent to the law to you. You know what I'm saying? And sue these people. Nothing hurts more than people having to come out of their pockets for something that they know that they did, which was just stupid and asinine. And listen, you're going to be labeled for who you are. But I think in the end, when you realize that you've hurt your livelihood or your family's livelihood, all because you want to act a fool out there in the stands, maybe because you're going to get, 5 minutes of shine, or, be that person that people are going to talk about on Facebook, on YouTube, because it seems like being the bad guy is the cool thing to be right now, right? Like playing the bad guy. Like Floyd Mayweather makes a ton of money playing the bad guy. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes he thinks that, I got to be the bad guy, 24/7, 365 in order to get that $350 million, fight pay-per-view contract or whatever. That's all well and good and cool when you got a team of people that want to promote and push that. But as individuals doing that kind of stuff really, when it comes to the situations that we're seeing now, how it's affecting not just players, but also other people, families, right? And things of that nature. Just to kind of act out these racial tendencies and things of that nature. Man, somebody got to put them in their place with this nonsense. Like, straight up and down. Like, enough is enough with this already. And then, one other thing I want to touch on is I know a lot of people are getting on Kyrie Irving because, he chose to call out, the Boston Celtics and the Boston Celtics fan base because of racial tendencies and racial tones and profiles that have obviously permeated throughout all of sports franchises. When you go there and you're not a Boston Celtics fan or a Boston Red Sox fan or whatever the case may be, that you as a minority are going to get chastised and ostracized and get called out in a racial demeaning fashion and things of that nature. You know what? I'm a Boston Celtics fan. I'm tired of that nonsense as well too, right? I'm tired of it. Like, call these people out. They're not fans. You know what I'm saying? They're not fans if they are belittling even people on your own team, right? On your own favorite team. They're belittling them by calling out other black players and demeaning them in a manner that is just, to me, it's not prescribed in any fashion when it comes to sports. So I get where Kyrie Irving is coming from. I know a lot of people are focused on the fact that it seems selfish of him bringing that up, but I do think that, listen, maybe in his own weird way of how he expresses things, he is actually highlighting something that is more than just something about whatever is going on in his past with teams that he's played for, as much as it is how it's affecting the whole NBA community and the culture of basketball.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to touch the Kyrie situation. I think right now at this point in juncture, and I think we would be best served maybe even getting some more information on all of these fronts, so to speak. But I definitely would love to dive into Boston's specific situation, their culture, why players seem to kind of not always want to stay for whatever reason. But that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Anyway, so of course we felt kind of, you know what I'm saying, we were on our soapbox a little bit when it comes to this particular portion of the topic. But, we definitely want to get your thoughts as well to our listeners here of the Baseline, where you sit with the mannerisms and the attitudes and the way that fans are behaving, freshly coming off of a pandemic where people have been isolated, locked in. Is there an excuse there that can be made for the behavior that is taking place so far in the first round of the series at some of these games? And we want to hear from you. So be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee and the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Hey, check this show out and all our previous shows. Go to www.thebaselinenba.com. So a couple of other things before we get right into our autopsy report, Shaw. Playoff news that obviously can impact the Milwaukee Bucks greatly. Dante DiVincenzo, he has suffered an injury. He is out for the remainder of the playoffs. How big a loss is it for the Bucks?
It's pretty big, but luckily they are a fairly deep team, and guys like Bryn Forbes can now kind of step in here. You can maybe slide Middleton down a little bit too.
The Harbinger? That's what I'm calling him, the Harbinger.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I think Milwaukee, by the time the show is out, everyone will know. So, I mean, the Bucks have dispatched the Heat even without DiVincenzo in Game 4, but for the totality of the playoffs, it's a pretty significant loss, but I think they're equipped to continue to still make a deep run with or without him.
Let me tell you something, bro, because we didn't touch on too many of those things, but if you had asked me who's been the most impressive team and really could very well be the most dangerous team out of all of the teams, East and West, the Milwaukee Bucks so far in this first round, it's not even about how they are just completely dismissing the Miami Heat and just chucking them over, say, you're beneath us this year. It's the way that they're playing defense, bro. They're playing that physical defense that I thought, man, I missed that when they were playing against the Chicago Bulls. And if you want to tell me that it's because they brought Drew Holiday in there and he's playing more like a bulldog, he's a more physical presence in that backcourt and stuff, I think is helping balance out that front court, then I'm on board with all of that, man. But if the Bucks are going to play this kind of defense throughout the playoffs, hey, man, that's a straight-up wake the F up call to the rest of the NBA. Do not sleep on the Milwaukee Bucks if they're really about this run.
The one thing I'll say is, I think the old adage is, beware a wounded dog. I think in this case, it's, beware the dog you're not paying attention of. Like, no, you kind of dismiss this dog, and it's like, all right, yeah, they're cool, they're good. They flamed out the last couple of years, they'll probably flame out again. And this is a different Bucks team. Like, Bud has a different system in place. They're playing a little bit, well, not a little bit better, a lot better. And they have the depth, as we alluded to, even with the loss of DiVincenzo, shooting the three and acceptable, a great rate. Bobby Portis, doing his thing coming off the bench, obviously with the addition of Tucker and things of that nature as well too. Bryn Forbes. They're just a good team, and I agree with you 100%. No one's really talking about them, and that's probably why they don't feel the pressure. They're just going to continue to ride it out. So we'll see what happens in round 2.
All right. Now, the other important notes that we want to get right into, Shaw. Shout-outs to our man's Bobby Jackson. He has been named the head coach of the Stockton Kings. We had Bobby Jackson on our show, man. Great interview, great opportunity to talk with really a Minnesota Timberwolves legend. An all-around great player, and obviously emerging as a great coach, and so I think this move up for him, I think is definitely a step in the right direction, and I'm hoping that this continues to be signs, man, that we're going to be talking about Bobby Jackson's name as a possible head coach down the road on some future NBA team.
Yeah, shouts to him for real. I don't know. Again, it's a weird situation because you're going to the G, right? But at the same time, you're going to go be the head coach and kind of implementing the Sacramento system, if you will, for the guys that you're trying to coach up a little bit. But I can't be bad because I think you get off of Walton's direct staff right now because I don't know. The Kings have said he's good to go for next year, but I'm weary of that. I don't think he's going to be coaching for a very long time. And a lot of times, if someone goes, this entire staff goes as well too. So I think Bobby Jackson might see the shots coming. I was like, let me go down here and grab this opportunity, and maybe I can work my way back up at some point as well too.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, we could easily be talking about Gentry being the head coach for the Stockton Kings, the Stockton Kings for the Sacramento Kings. Which, again, I mean, I think Bobby Jackson is looking at this and saying, "Oh, I want to stay in the Cali area. I'll wait till, to your point, when the shots are fired, and maybe then, Gentry will be like, hey, I want to bring you back. What's it going to take to bring you back?" And he may incentivize him, saying, "Let me come back up in the ranks." But I think while all this is taking place, he's got to get some kind of head coaching experience under his belt. And remember, when we had him on our show and we were interviewing him, that to me, and I guess it's just in the way that he was talking about it, like he wants to coach, like he wants to be a head coach at some particular point. And I think every particular decision that he's made has kind of put him in that direction where, all right, now is the time for me to start doing things that are putting me in that kind of position. And I think when you're talking about minority head coaches, the part of the reason why they don't get the same kind of looks like the, Steve Nash's and, the Mike Budenholzers and, other guys who've kind of come up in different ways and have been connected and then get the job per se, is because they don't buy into the idea that some of these players actually do have the capacity to coach. And so unless you are actually coaching, right? Like, look what happened to Patrick Ewing. He basically has to go coach the Georgetown Hoyas for him to have to have the same kind of legitimacy and talk at one time or another, maybe to be considered a head coach in the NBA, which we've known for the longest time he should be coaching some kind of team in the NBA, right? Like, what is it going to take for a guy like Bobby Jackson to probably get that kind of look, get that kind of opportunity? Maybe this is the kind of step that he has to take in order to position himself to do that, and maybe he reads that writing and makes that decision on that premise alone.
Oh, you're on some deep stuff here today.
Yeah, man. I'm just saying. It's just, the philosophical Cal in me. I'm sorry. My apologies. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, it's about that time. I hear my man Shaw, a.k.a. Dr. Kill Patience. He's throwing on the jacket. He's got the scalpels ready to go. It's time for us to dissect a couple of teams in this edition of the Autopsy Report. You'll catch that here on The Breakdown. Time to break it down.
I break it down to the bone gristle.
They're dead.
What? Who's dead?
My team is dead! They knew we were coming, man. They knew we were coming. They're dead! They're all dead!
Time now for the Autopsy Report. We got two teams on the slab. Your man, Cal Gameface Lee and Dr. Kill Patience, a.k.a. Dr. Shaw, in the building. And we're ready to go to work on the Charlotte Hornets and the San Antonio Spurs. So Shaw will first start off with the Charlotte Hornets. a marginally a decent year, for the Charlotte Hornets. Surprised a lot of people, but on the back end of their incredible run, they tapered off. So as a team, they wind up basically finishing 10th in the NBA. Verbally got knocked out of the play-in tournament. But a lot of good things, I think, did come from this basketball team. And I think the thing that I tend to wonder about, Shaw, is this something where it's kind of a short-term, flash in the pan type season, given the circumstance, it's a shortened season, all that? Or do we really take some good things from what the Charlotte Hornets did this year and say to ourselves, this is sustainable, like this is something that they can build on and incrementally get better at?
So I hate, and let me say this, I hate being kind of the, beating the dead horse and reiterating the same point. But I feel like every single team in the league is just going to throw this year out. And it's like, man, what if? Now, the Hornets, they made some great strides. But as you alluded to, fell off an effing cliff, because of the result of the injuries. And once they got to that number 4 ranking in the Eastern Conference, they just saw them steadily drop as injuries continued to mount. So this is a team, while they didn't finish the season well, have to feel like they were robbed of their ability to be successful. In a year where teams like the Knicks and the Hawks, kind of jumped up, the Hornets were one of those teams as well too that could have were in the running for a home court advantage at one point. So they have to feel like, hey, they didn't have Hayward to close the year. Bridges missed significant time towards the end of the year. LaMelo obviously missed time and then was able to come back. But it's been rough for them. And I think despite it all, we had picked them as to be in the play-in tournament, and they still were, right? So we didn't get that wrong, but considering as high as they had gotten, that ended up ultimately being a disappointment, which is weird. That's a weird place to be, because now you've kind of accelerated the expectations for your team. And I don't know if it's real or if it's fake. I'd love to see them healthy and see them back next year and see what they're able to do in the Eastern Conference. But I think it's a weird year. But I think one thing that can definitely be said is Borrego is a great coach, and he was able to continue to have his team fighting, even though if they didn't ultimately have the horses.
I like where you ended that. Because I was really on the fence about Borrego. I really didn't know anything about him. And I think he really, gave us a good glimpse into how he could actually be good for the Charlotte Hornets. The problem that I see, and I think this is just really typical of a team that, hasn't been ran well. Let me put it like that. Because I don't know if whether or not we are seeing, this Jordan-owned franchise taking steps in the right direction. I often feel like when the Charlotte Hornets, they give you 1 or 2 good seasons, and then they figure out a way to just basically blow everything up, and then they take 10 steps back. And sometimes it might be because they see the writing on the wall too quickly. Maybe their priorities are out of whack because, they have, good players like, the years that they had Kemba Walker, and they're saying to themselves, what can we do in order to assure that he's going to stay around? We're going to pay him a ton of money, or, how do we keep a guy like that in a small marketplace like this? And sometimes I think they miss the big picture about taking incremental steps that will allow for the franchise to really have sustainability, even if it means losing a quality player. Like, for the fact that the team has got to be held up on the shoulders of a LaMelo Ball. Here's my concern. LaMelo Ball might be box office, but if he's somebody that constantly gets injured and your team just does not perform well, doesn't put themselves in a position to get into the playoffs, well, then when he winds up out the door, what do you still have around the surrounding pieces to make people confident that once he leaves, you can still keep doing what you're doing? I just feel like sometimes it's too predicated on the superstar and not necessarily on the team and the talent that you have and that you're bringing on board to what you're building. And that's, to me, is the bigger concern, because they do have some good pieces. Terry Rozier actually had a bounce-back season, all things considered, right? Devontae Graham struggled but found his way. I think now maybe with LaMelo Ball and the way that the NBA is trending with having multiple guard sets available, this might actually be a good thing. But whether or not they understand that, they realize that, and they really kind of build off of that, I think is going to be the bigger question. Because with a guy like Borrego, it almost feels like he could be there for the long term, but he might wind up being compromised because the ownership is going to continue to keep nickel and diming their way to trying to do something because the priorities are just not there the same way with the rest of the team.
Yeah, I believe I saw over the weekend that Borrego might have got an extension. They were talking about an extension, so they seem to be committed there. And so your point about the management and the front office is it rings true. Jordan, for whatever reason, I think at this point now, maybe he realized he shouldn't be as involved. And I know he's had kind of, I want to say, lame duck general managers that, kind of under him in some ways. And that's no disrespect to anybody there too. I mean, Jordan's obviously is a massive presence there, but he brought in Kupchak. Kupchak has done some stuff here now that seems to make it work. The Hayward signing, for all intents and purposes, was a success. He just, he took his annual sabbatical where he had to get hurt. Just, it's kind of what it is with Hayward at this stage of his career. But he had borderline all-star numbers, for this team. I think they're right there to be, continually fighting for a playoff seed. And if they can add a piece or two, then, maybe that conversation, now they're not only fighting for a playoff seed, but maybe they're fighting for a home court advantage. I think they're obviously years away from being title contenders in any capacity, no matter kind of who they bring in here. But I do think things are heading in the right direction, and they have some money to spend. So does the allure of playing for Michael Jordan but does it ring with today's players or what would be free agents? And the answer to that is I don't know. But is a combination of Jordan and Kupchak and now LaMelo Ball as a guy who can maybe help you recruit and really get things going there, does that do it? And I think the answer is more yes than it ever has been. I'm not saying that it's 100% yes going to happen, but in years past, Kemba wasn't the guy that I think other players looked around the league as, hey, I want to go play with Kemba and under Jordan's franchise. I think with LaMelo there and kind of how they're being run now, it brings a little bit of different swag to this team, and maybe some players in free agency may want to take a look and try to join this young core.
I got an interesting question to ask you, Shaw. Do you think that the mystique, the legendary mystique of Jordan and the desire for Jordan to win has finally caught up with each other, right? In other words, interpret what you were saying earlier before about where the franchise struggles most in its essence, where you want to attract quality free agent players to help build this team to be a force in the Eastern Conference. Who are you sending out to be your spokesperson, to be your mouthpiece? 9 times out of 10, Michael Jordan will probably want to be that guy because he knows that he has that clout. But is that necessarily what is needed and necessary to speak the language to a young player who is a star in the league and is looking and starving to play next to talented guys who want to go out there and do this thing? It's not about, taking over teams or anything. I'm just saying, what are the incentives and who do you have as your ambassador, as your mouthpiece in order to bring that person over? And I'm wondering if what we're talking about right now is finally Michael Jordan gets it. Finally, it doesn't have to be about Jordan and the Jordan brand. It doesn't have to be about him being the GOAT. It doesn't have to be about anything except knowing that he's got guys that do want to win and want to win for his franchise, and letting them go out there and speak on behalf of what it is that he really does want to build, and let him focus more on funding whatever's required to position this team to best compete. Do you think that we're seeing that corner being turned in that particular perspective?
I mean, you would hope so. And I think getting a very competent general manager, although some people must say he's past his prime too, in Kupchak, that union is what the Hornets are banking on, to help them evaluate through the draft and scouting, but then also to help them recruit in free agency. The one thing that you and I mean, we're how old we are, right? We understand now that these players now grew up with Kobe and LeBron as their heroes and not necessarily Jordan. right? Jordan is somebody who they heard of just by playing the game, but they didn't really watch him or see him. Even a guy like LaMelo Ball, like he's hearing the stories of Jordan from his father, probably more than anything else, and maybe not all great stories, according to LeVar, who said he could beat Jordan, a couple of years ago. So it's really interesting now. I think you have to rely and understand that times change. Who you are may not matter anymore to certain players and some of the younger generation right now. But what this team does have is a great team chemistry. And you saw that they believed in each other. And LaMelo is proof positive of just kind of bringing a youthful exuberance and playfulness. He and Biyombo really forged a great relationship throughout the course of the season. As you alluded to, Rozier played really great. Graham struggled with a role, having LaMelo there, but ultimately, as you alluded to, found his way and was able to start to make things happen. Bridges, instead of forcing him to start, came off the bench. And Zeller and all those guys, like everybody just kind of fell in line. But it's a very, very complex mix, I think, with this group because they're not cast off, so to say, but they're a team that nobody really believed in, even LaMelo coming in as a rookie, hence why he fell to 3 to some degree. So if you change those parts around, you have to be very, very careful about the dichotomy and how you mix it. Because even a guy like Hayward, he left a winning situation in Boston because he didn't want to be the third or fourth banana. So he comes here where he can, kind of be like at least 1 or 2. And if you continue to bring other guys in, you're going to see him maybe start to regress a little bit. And, I think that's something that they have to figure out, but you don't not acquire talent. You know what I mean? You just have to figure out, all right, well, who's really here for the long haul? Who can accept the role for the long haul as you try to get better?
This is a team, Shaw, and it's funny that you bring up, Hayward, because as good as Hayward has always been, he's always been a good, solid basketball player. And I would probably challenge Hayward that had he stayed in the Western Conference, he would proverbially be a constant, all-star. I don't know where that team would be. It would have certainly been awesome to have seen him maybe play with, Donovan Mitchell, circumstance. But then you can make the argument, hey, Donovan Mitchell wouldn't be there if things didn't happen the way that they happened with Gordon Hayward, right? I'm just curious, though, Shaw, what do you do if you're the Charlotte Hornets to address a lot of their issues, which is basically in the front court, right? Like this team does not rebound the basketball well. They were 25th in defensive rebounding. This total rebounding, they were 20th. Blocks, they were 16th. So clearly they're a team that lacks a physical presence in the painted area at times. They obviously play, center by committee, with even at times PJ Washington is not even a legit center. He's more of a 4-3 kind of guy. They obviously had to play more small ball. What do you do in order to address clearly a team who's going to be relying on shooting the basketball, and if they're not shooting it at a good percentage, they don't have enough, or they don't have adequate bodies that rebound the basketball well enough to give themselves second chance opportunities. Now, I will say, though, that they were 6th best in offensive rebounding. But I think what I'm saying is from a defensive perspective, they don't give themselves enough opportunities and possessions to get better shots because they don't rebound the basketball well defensively in order to do that, to get out in transition and to open up the floor more with a great talent like a LaMelo Ball, as you would expect them to be.
Yeah, and they turn the ball over. Right. So you combine all of those things and you're just limiting your overall possessions. And you have to value each possession, especially if you're trying to be a playoff team. This is why you heard them sniffing around Andre Drummond, and maybe they'll circle back to that in the offseason. But understanding what role Drummond would play as just kind of an elite level rebounder, not somebody who they're going to feature offensively. If he could do that, then that might be a decent fit for them. And I think they've sniffed around Drummond for a couple of years now, same way they sniffed around Hayward, and they ultimately got him. So this might be the summer and the season they finally get that situation done. But I think they do need to address the bigs. Zeller's contract is up. Biyombo's contract is up as well too. So they have a young guy who they drafted in Vernon Carey, actually from the South Florida area, who they think can maybe turn into at least a rotational big at some point. So maybe they plug him in if they are able to address their offseason needs at that 5 position. But it is crucial for them. You're 100% correct. They do need to address it and figure it out. But they don't need somebody who needs to come in that role and take the ball out of LaMelo's hands, Hayward's hands, or even Rozier's hands. Like, hey, just come in here, be an elite level rebounder and defender, and you get in where you fit in. And a guy like Drummond could potentially do that for them. But I'd have to kind of look at the free agent list to kind of see who else is out there. But this is something that I think they know they have to address, and they're not going to shy away from it. They only have $81 million in committed salary next year, so they can be aggressive. They might have the most cap flexibility going into the summer. I think Miami's up there as well too. So I expect them to be very active, and maybe the year like they had will be attractive to would-be free agents.
It'll be interesting to see how aggressive the Charlotte Hornets play, because to your point, if the Miami Heat have as much flexibility, if not more flexibility than they do, they certainly have, you know what I'm saying, the cachet, right? More so than Charlotte. And so it would be interesting to see if whether or not the Charlotte Hornets, try to kind of, buck their shoulders up a little bit and apply some pressure on a Pat Riley driven. He's obviously going to want to make sure that this team is ready to go next year. Well, they're in the same division, right? And so I would expect there to be a little bit of competition, so to speak, a little bit of gamesmanship taking place from an executive level. Last question I want to ask you, Shaw, before we move on to the next team. If LaMelo Ball wins Rookie of the Year, and a lot of people are trending towards saying that that's what's going to take place here, what do you think that does for the Charlotte Hornets? And what kind of clock are we now talking about when accolades like that are being passed on to a phenom like him?
I don't think the Rookie of the Year does anything, just gives them a nice bragging point, so to speak. But I think the holistic approach that the team has, and as being as close as they were this year, that accelerates their proverbial clock, because he came in, he will win Rookie of the Year, and now he's injected life into this team. So they'll want to see what that leads to, especially when fans are back next season. So I think that Charlotte Hornets crowd will be rocking, and he will be a draw when he's going into other people's arenas as well. Again, as long as he can stay healthy. So there's a lot of fiscal things that will come with LaMelo just kind of being Rookie of the Year and just being good in general. But the Rookie of the Year award by itself doesn't really change the perspective of the team as much as him just being good in general and the life he brings to it, as much as that's going to do, and Borrego continuing to kind of coach his ass off. So I like the outlook, especially if they are already able to add a piece or two here. But even if they don't, so to speak, they'll still be plucky. You know what I mean? They'll be Indiana Pacers good, which I know is not in a sexy place to be, but you're still competing for a playoff spot. And especially if the league continues with the 10-in play-in tournament situation, I think Charlotte would be hard-pressed not to be a top 10 team each year.
All right, man. The Charlotte Hornets, again, not a good way to end the season, because they got blown out quite a few times, a lot of bad losses. They finished below 500, but again, they were vying and they participated with an opportunity to actually to get into the playoffs. And while they fell short, you have to feel good about the way that the Charlotte Hornets overall this season came out, because certainly they exceeded a lot of our expectations when we gave our previews about where this team might wind up falling as it pertains to the Eastern Conference standings. All right, coming up, Shaw and I are going to be talking about the San Antonio Spurs. Sometimes when we talk about the Spurs, it's like, why do we even have this jacket on? This is a team that just refuses to die. They might even pop up on the table right before we even get into it. Well, you'll find out here on the flip side, on the baseline. This is the baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And back with the Autopsy Report. Dr. Kill Patience, Cal Gameface Lee. And we will be talking about the San Antonio Spurs. San Antonio Spurs, once again, just shocking the holy hell out of the NBA. Just refusing to die, refusing to quit. Very similar to the Charlotte Hornets, they finished with a 33-39 season, albeit we thought that it would be much worse for them. They actually had an opportunity to participate in the playoffs. Obviously, they got ousted. But all things considered, Shaw, they looked a hell of a lot more impressive than New Orleans Pelicans, which a lot of teams picked to be replacing the San Antonio Spurs. I think people were thinking that the New Orleans Pelicans are probably going to be like a 6-7 seed in this year's playoffs. And yet, even after losing LaMarcus Aldridge, Greg Popovich, Dejounte Murray, DeMar DeRozan, and a whole cast of others figured out a way to play competitive basketball as only we know the San Antonio Spurs to be. And even though we've said that, this iteration of the Spurs is just not going to be good enough to compete with the teams that we do know would have probably gotten to the playoffs, you got to tip your hat because Popovich brought it out of these guys to compete. And while we'll talk a little bit about the numbers of where this team lies, and I think, this could probably be the last iteration that we see of this style of this team and basketball-wise, you still have to feel good that if you have any confidence about whether or not winning basketball can be had in San Antonio, it starts first and foremost with Greg Popovich.
Yeah, Pop's a coach, and he's going to figure out a way to coach whatever team and roster that he has. And I think that's why he's a Hall of Famer. That's why he's great, you know what I mean? And may go down as the greatest NBA coach in history. But this team has flaws, and he does an acceptable job of trying to mask those flaws, and get them to be as competitive as possible. The biggest question going into the offseason, obviously, is what do they do with DeRozan? No extension talks or conversations were had, and for all intents and purposes, people think he's probably going to dip, and go somewhere. Where that is, who knows? But he would probably be better off trying to finish off his career somewhere else. And then that would have allowed the Spurs to continue to develop Dejounte Murray. Jakob Poeltl came on really strong towards the latter part of the year, especially defensively, really proved himself as a rebounder and a shot blocker. And then younger guys like Devin Vassell, who didn't get a chance to play, and hopefully they can keep Derek White healthy. Derek White, I think, only played like 30 games this year. So those names don't say, oh, wow, you know what I mean? That's exciting. And that's a playoff team, but you can't count them out with Pop. Like, he'll find a way to duct tape that together, and then all of a sudden they'll be very, very competitive throughout. But they have, again, big decisions. DeRozan, Gay, Patty Mills, Trey Lyles, even, like, all these guys are going to be free agents. And, how do the Spurs rebuild? And we just talked about Charlotte, as kind of this small to mid-market team not being a super attractive destination. They don't even have a Hall of Fame coach. Borrego's actually from the Pop school, right? But Pop is Pop. But does that same thing? Does that resonate with players now who potentially want to come there? And I don't think it does. I mean? I just don't think it does. And that makes me nervous for the Spurs and their ability to kind of reinvent themselves faster, to be more than just a play-in team scratching and clawing to get in. This is a team we're used to having sustained success, and I don't really see a path for them to get back there right now with the talent that's on their roster.
The San Antonio Spurs really remind me of a team that just knows how to exercise patience. It's almost as if they built up all of this basketball equity that if they have bad seasons, even their fans can't be disappointed, because they've been spoiled to seeing successful basketball for more than 2 decades, right? Well, more than 2 decades, 3 decades. You can make the argument, right? So my whole thing when it comes to what we're talking about here is, in essence, will the moves that they have to make justify the moves that they need to make? There's so many swirling questions around the talent that is on the roster. Part of it is saying, well, when are we going to get answers to the Derek Whites, the Lonnie Walkers? I think it's a safe bet that Dejounte Murray he's a great basketball player. Is he a basketball player that you think should be taking over a basketball team? Like if you had made those comparisons when they had Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, and Manu Ginobili, where is Dejounte Murray as far as what he represents when you had that type of trifecta? Where would he be? Would he be like the Tony Parker, or would he be kind of like your Manu Ginobili, right? And I think in the end, it still leaves outlying questions like, where will this team find its next Tim Duncan? Is it that they're going to have to get lucky in the draft, or is it that they do have a diamond in the rough, like when they built up a Kawhi Leonard, and it's just a matter of time before this person just pops out of nowhere and just suddenly becomes a great player because Popovich found something to kind of pull it out of him, or whatever the case would be. Maybe they thought they were trying to do that with DeRozan because, back then, obviously, he was well in the prime of of what he was capable of, and it was in a win-now mode. And by pairing him with LaMarcus Aldridge, they thought that they could build something from that. But I do think that what that has reminded Popovich and their coaching staff is a lot of the allure was not going to come from the players as much as it's coming from the culture. And I think they're getting back to that. And if we see Derek White, if he can stay healthy, if we see with Lonnie Walker and with Vassell and these guys, that they can come together and help elevate that winning culture of basketball, while be it they're not going to be as great as some of the teams that are put together right now, like in the Phoenix Suns or the Los Angeles Lakers and so forth and so on, I still think that they could be marginally be better than what we're seeing from the New Orleans Pelicans. They could be better than what we're seeing possibly from the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? People are still waiting to see that combination of Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, and now that they've got Anthony Edwards, start making things happen. So that to me could be a good sign. But I think a lot of it is going to come down to, does R.C. Buford believe in building up the players through the culture, or building up the players through enticing some kind of free agent to come on board to give them this inclination or idea that this is how they're going to win basketball again in San Antonio into this era of how the NBA is played?
Yeah, well, I actually misspoke earlier. I mean, Spurs have stupid money left going into this. Just stupid money. $59 million in committed salary. Like, that's dumb. So they have all kinds of money that they can throw around. But like you said, who's going to come, especially if they're not able to re-ink and re-sign DeRozan? Because you figure if they re-sign DeRozan, he comes in at maybe $30 million. But then you still have maybe another spot, at least for another big name guy out there. And all the big name guys, I'm going to say all the big name guys, but a good majority of them probably don't fit into the Spurs system. A quick check at the free agency trackers, if you will. Kawhi Leonard, well, we know that's not happening, right?
And listen, if they get knocked out by the Dallas Mavericks, man, look, I'm just saying, he may like California,
can't go home
but
again.
he'll always know where them chips first came from, right? Okay.
But Chris Paul, player option, Kyle Lowry, probably going to LA, Miami, or Philly or something like that. Then you have Mike Conley. Could be Spursian.
Wait, Shaw, let me ask you though. Do you think it's far-fetched that if Kyle Lowry has maybe one or two good seasons in him, and he's paired up with his boy DeMar DeRozan for a couple seasons, right? You don't think that they may be able to kind of spark? I mean, listen, it's still the Western Conference. It's still LeBron's yard.
So before you go any further, then what do you do with DeJounte? You bringing him off the bench? Playing Lowry at 2. I mean, I guess you could do that.
You could probably play that. Yeah, exactly.
So, and then DeRozan was playing some forward this year. I mean, he might have been playing some 5. So, like, Pop's not afraid to move him around. So, yeah. I guess it's possible, but I don't think Lowry at this stage is going to choose, let me play with my homeboy in San Antonio over trying to go win a chip somewhere else. If DeRozan were to join him somewhere else, I can't see Lowry going to San Antonio to make that work. But it is a nice thought, though. I mean, again, I think he obviously has a lot of love for DeMar, and they may not mind playing together again. I just can't see that being San Antonio. Kind of, and running through like the rest of like the kind of like top 10, if you will. I can see them maybe going after like a guy like John Collins in Atlanta. I can see them, potentially doing that. Then you got Lonzo.
I think though the reason why they may not is because John Collins is going to probably ask for stupid money, and I like the fact that a team like the Spurs is just like, I'll give you money, but not that kind of money you think you want. Because listen, while it was nice when we saw Collins, out in Charlotte and everything like that, cool dude and everything, he hasn't really proven his worth. He's an exciting basketball player, but I'm not seeing all of what the hype is about right yet. You know what I'm saying? He's supposed to be paired with Trae Young, and they're supposed to be that future. But remember, he had been involved in some trade talks already. And granted, he was injured, but I'm just saying, like, I'm trying to see where if the Spurs are going to splurge, are they splurging on a John Collins just because John Collins is going to be available? I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. We're just running through Spencer Dinwiddie. I mean, that could maybe you do that. You can maybe try to make an.
I would like that. I like Dinwiddie's game. His game can translate in San Antonio. He's a versatile player, and I think maybe that could be the key, Shaw. Like when we talk about the San Antonio Spurs, what lane can you find them being in that can allow them to maintain a level of competitiveness? You know, they may not be able to overtake teams because, to your point, some of the available players that you're kind of, you know, reading off of right now might not fit in the culture, and it may be a year or two before we start talking about those type of players. But what I'm saying is versatility. Having guys that Pop can say, I want to put you here, and they're willing to do it. Not because he has to force them to play or be in that type of style of basketball, but he knows that they're capable of doing it and they want to go do it.
Yeah. So again, it's all gonna be about mindset. You know, just kind of running through some other names. Norman Powell, I could see them maybe making a play for him, player option. Rashawn Holmes, maybe you think Pirtle can play some 4, and you alternate. I don't know. That maybe it's not an amazing fit there. Again, we talked about Dinwiddie already. Kelly Oubre, Evan Fournier, like, you know what I mean? Like it's tough going into this year. So is there a trade they could potentially craft, you know, to try to get the requisite talent that they probably will need? Again, a lot of this is still depending if DeRozan were to continue to walk, but even if he walks, they still have flexibility to bring in somebody else, especially with Gay and Patty Mills and those guys coming off the book. So the San Antonio front office has a job set out in front of them, like all NBA teams do. But knowing that what their team and culture is, it's hard for me to say that, okay, they're just going to rest on their laurels and they'll continue to wait. I mean, Pop is getting up there in age. You know what I mean? So these years of just not really being in the playoffs, I can't imagine sit well while he's not outwardly complaining. And obviously he's going to be a Spur for life. It's just at what point does the clock really start to tick, you know, and what his next path and next decision is going to be and how this roster can improve. So I like the Spurs as an organization. I just don't love the roster construction currently, because none of those guys really, even as much as I like DeJounte, project as guys who are going to be stars or even all-stars in this game at any time soon.
I'll tell you this right now. The final act of Popovich is him setting up Becky Hammond to be the first female head coach, and for the San Antonio Spurs. I don't think she's going to leave to go do that for somebody else.
Well, and let me interject real quick, though. It's like, but at the same time, like, I think the Spurs have enough wherewithal and they can read the room. Like, they don't want to hand Becky a fucking shit sandwich here. Like, you know, it's
absolutely
like
not.
She's the first female coach, and she just has a roster that she can't do anything with.
But in fairness, I think that what happens is while Popovich steps down, he actually steps up. I think he will position himself somewhere in the Spurs organization, either as consultant or as he's already assumed, you know, executive operations in some capacity, even though he collaborates with R.C. Buford. But what I'm just saying is Greg Popovich may walk away from wanting to coach, but I don't think he walks away from the San Antonio Spurs organization and continuing to develop and mold the line of coaches that has been through him that want to stay with the San Antonio Spurs organization. That's all that I was kind of putting emphasis on, as far as, you know, he's not going to definitely, he doesn't want ever for someone to be responsible to be given a shit show team to have to coach. It doesn't even matter if it's not even Becky Hammond. But my thing is that I think Popovich will always have a hand in with this organization. I think Buford will make sure of that as well too. But that was my only perspective from it.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, not challenging that in any way. I think, again, it's actually testament to the Spurs and their culture, and understanding, hey, like I said, they know how to read the room, and they'd want to make sure that whoever Pop's replacement is not going into a situation that's going to be adverse, especially if it were to be the first female head coach in NBA history. So I'm dying to know what they do. Dying to know what DeRozan ultimately decides, because I guess a lot of it maybe hinges on that in some way as well. But the Spurs team I would assume will be active, because I just don't think they have the opportunity to play what their normal role is, where they're super patient and they're not going to do anything crazy. I think they may have to throw some money at the situation, maybe even for some guys, and maybe you do it like how the Heat did this year, where you give them a 2-year deal, second-year team option, so that you're not locking the money up forever, but you're trying to kind of throw something at the wall here and see what sticks, see if you can capture some talent, and more importantly, some chemistry that can be long-term.
All right, Shaw. So the Spurs finished 10th this year. Given who they leapfrogged ahead of and who is ahead of them, what is your confidence level for next season, given the work that they're going to have to do in the offseason, that leads you to think that they will be right back where they are next year, doing the same thing, or if not, fully embedded in the playoff picture?
Listen, I mean, you have to think the Pelicans are eventually coming, right? Like they're eventually going to get into this conversation, even with as well as Pop does as coach, and keeping maybe even underwhelming talent competitive. But the other team too, and this is going to be a very, very unpopular opinion, but the way the Timberwolves finished the regular season said something to me. I think there might be a change finally brewing, so that they can, get out of the doldrums and not be, 14th, 15th in the West, but maybe they can scratch the surface of getting into the play-in tournament as well. So they have more talent on paper than the Spurs do right now. I don't think anybody could argue that. You're looking at Cat, Anthony Edwards, and D'Angelo Russell alone, even Malik Beasley for all his woes and troubles. Comparing that to DeJounte and Jakob Poeltl and even Keldon Johnson and Lonnie Walker. Like, come on, bro. Like, there's clearly more talent in Minnesota there. So you'd figure that that's going to be another team that they're going to have to kind of stave off. So it's looking rough right now if they're not able to really make a big splash in the summer.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what the San Antonio Spurs do. It's interesting when we talk about all of these teams and we deep dive into, whether or not what they're doing is sustainable and they're going to be competitive come this upcoming season. The San Antonio Spurs always seem to be a team that have more questions than answers that somehow get answered after the dust settles. And whether they've done too little or they do too much, they seem to fall right exactly where they believe they need to be. And so that to me is a sign of an organization that knows how to handle itself. And I have every confidence in the world that no matter what these other teams are going to wind up doing or not doing, the San Antonio Spurs are going to do what they need to do. In other words, they say, I do fine all by my lonesome. That's where the San Antonio Spurs sit when we talk about the Spurs way. Absolutely. I mean, why do we even need to do an autopsy report? They can autopsy themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like, Shaw, let's go ahead and just leave the shovels with Pop. He can go
like
bury.
You said, they keep rising up from the dead.
Exactly.
It's like Army of the Dead.
Right, like, why
even
don't throw dirt on these dudes, man? Like, just leave it as an open casket for these cats, man, because they always coming up out of the damn thing, right? Anyway, awesome conversation regarding two teams that have certainly opened up eyes for this season. The Charlotte Hornets and the San Antonio Spurs, and great conversation all around, brother.
As always, and I hope our fans and listeners enjoy this one. We love doing the autopsy reports. It's a great time to really kind of dissect, look into the past, present, and future of these teams. And I think I'll always say this, I'll definitely be a broken record here. All these teams are intriguing. They're in the league, right? So they're of interest to me. They should be of interest to you as well, too, if you're listening to our show. But I think the Spurs and the Hornets have alternating futures, maybe in some ways, as a young team tries to figure out where they're going, and an older team coach with now young players has to figure out where they're going as well, too, in San Antonio. So great convo. Hope the fans and listeners chime in and let us know their thoughts, what they think either one of these teams should do. And we'll see who we put up on the slab next week, bro. Absolutely, man. So once again, we appreciate you and yours hopping on board with us. Cal, Game Face Lee, my man, Warren, Dr. Kill Patience, Shaw, on the ones and twos. Once again, have a great Memorial weekend. A lot of NBA games on the slab for next week as the playoffs continue. And be sure to check us out. At some point, we will be doing our hot mics on there as well, too, so you don't want to miss out on that. For the Baseline, Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. We'll catch up with you next time.